When I was a young little boy, not that long ago, we lived in a city called Columbus in a state called Georgia. I was there for 8 years, and I was about 7 or 8 years old, and our street was named Califon Court. And this court ended in a cul-de-sac, which is simply the end of the drive, dead end, had a big circle with the houses all along it. We had friends, we were at the top of the hill, we had friends at the bottom of the hill named the Hammonds, Marcus, Jason, and Katessa. The next door neighbor was named Vanessa. These were all my friends, or so I thought. We would go down there and play, we would eat their food, sometimes they would threaten to spank us, and we'd run back home because they used switches down the road. One day, Vanessa, who was a little bit older than my brother, so a few years older than me, came over to Katessa's house. That's confusing, I know. And we were just playing, and she was really good at getting me to do things I probably shouldn't do. And I was pretty sheltered, so I didn't know it was necessarily wrong. I was just doing stupid stuff, but she told me, and I trusted her. She was my friend. And she came over and saw this big tree, and towards the middle of the tree, this big branch kind of came out, and there was a nest with baby birds in this nest. And she said, "Let's knock that nest down." You get an idea of the kind of person Vanessa was, right? And so she talked me into throwing these rocks up as high as I could to knock this nest out. Well, I wasn't very big, and I couldn't get it very high. So I would throw a big rock, and I'd yell things like, "Geronimo!" or "Timber!" And the rock would not make it and come back down, no harm, no foul. And she kept pushing me to go harder and go higher and go faster and go further. And I grabbed this rock, and the kids are all playing around at this particular point. And Katessa was about a year younger than I was, so maybe 7, and I was about 8. And I grabbed this rock, and she's pushing me, and I'm like, fine. I hard as I could, launch it in the air. It goes over the branch, because I'm a big beast of a man, over the branch, misses the nest, comes back down, and I'm stuck in slow-mo, right? And the rock is coming down. I can see it. I look down, and Katessa is underneath the rock, and I know disaster is going to strike. That was loud. Sorry about that. And I can't do anything about it. And the rock hits on top of the head, bounces off of her head. She's okay. She's fine. But it split her head open. Parents are freaking out. She's crying, and Vanessa, the instigator, says, "What did you do?" So what did I do? I ran home. I'm not an idiot. Not a very good friend, Vanessa. It was her idea. I was guilty as well, but she was the older, wiser one. The question I have for you today, and let me just give you some information. This sermon, in its writing, became very layered. And I couldn't remove some of the layers to get to the point, which was friends. So I've left them in there. So I am very unscripted today, which is dangerous for you because you see my dad, when he's walking around telling things, I'm a little bit worse. I'll try to keep, I'm not long, but just try to follow along. There are points in here, and I'll stop and I'll tell what they are, but just try to follow along. Friends. What kind of friends do you have? That's the question I would ask in the beginning of this. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, now, I'm going to stop again. We're going to live in the book of Job in just a minute. But before Job, we're in Proverbs. Proverbs 22, verses 24 through 25. Don't make friends with an angry man, and don't be a companion of a hot-tempered man or woman, or you will learn their ways and entangle yourself in a snare. Do you have friends that are like that, hot-tempered? It sounds to me like there's a danger in the kind of friends that we have in becoming like them. Most students and most adults would say, hey, I'm going to find a friend who needs me despite their problems or concerns. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying here. But we want to find friends that I'll make them better, when in reality, we become more like them. What kind of friends do you have? I'm not saying don't have friends that aren't like you, but I am saying you've got to learn to keep them at a distance. There's a difference between a friend who I keep far away, who I love. This was mentioned in the forgiveness sermon, right? Who I love, and friends who I allow in. That's my safe place. That's a danger place, because when you're let in, you can hurt me. There was in college a guy named Kenny, and he could run and he could jump, and he was just a really great athlete. Not a good friend of mine, but a friend of mine that I became pretty. In fact, if you look at Jacob Heinen, it's like Jacob Heinen, kind of. Because you know who Kenny is. So Kenny was this real quiet guy, never talked much, but super good athlete. He joined the fraternity that I was a part of, and we became kind of good friends. Well, he wasn't very loud. Well, about 3 years into that friendship, Kenny got a new friend, and I don't know his name. It didn't bother me. We weren't that good of friends. But they'd walk around campus like fighting each other, like verbally, like yelling and screaming, because it was funny. And they would kind of get people like looking and getting people filming, oh, here comes a fight, and oh, no, we're just kidding. And it got really uncomfortable. One day, Kenny came to one of our meetings, and he was just kind of brewing and stewing. He looked a little bit like upset, which is unlike Kenny. And he sat down in a chair, and we're having a meeting about an event that we're planning, and we're just kind of going through it, and he's just quiet, arms folded. He is not happy. Well, when people aren't happy in the room, what do? You kind of just ignore them, right? That's what you do. You probably shouldn't. That's what we did. We ignored it because we didn't want to set him off. And so Kenny's stewing, we're talking, having a good time, planning this event, and Kenny says, I got to go in a minute. And I was the president of the club, and I said, well, what do you have? You have any ideas for us for this event or any suggestions? And he said, oh, now you're going to ask me. Okay, I see how it is. And he got up, and he began like doing the whole like guy thing like this. And I'm a guy, so I was like, what? You know? I'm not proud of that fact, but if we're going to go, I guess we can go, but what's the problem? What's happening here? And he went off on me and just went nuts. And I was like, I don't know what's happening here. I'm sorry. If we're going to go, let's go. Otherwise, let's talk it out. You know, I'm confused. He's kind of a big guy, so I was probably going to get beat up anyway. And he walks out of the room, and he's gone. I'm like, what just happened? That whole night, we just got married. I was in bed just like thinking it through in my head, concerned. What did I do wrong? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. He calls me the next day, and we meet up. Man, I'm sorry. I just lost it. I'm so sorry. I was like, Kenny, that's not like you. Suddenly, you're around this new friend, and you're play fighting, and your whole demeanor changes. What happened? I don't know what happened there, Kenny, but you're becoming more like that than you were before you knew that guy. There's a concern that I have for you. And he acknowledged that was probably not a healthy thing to do, and I don't know if it changed or not, but what I saw in Kenny was a man who became like this person, an angry man, hot-tempered. He became entrapped and ensnared. Psalm 55, verse 12 through 14. Now it is not an enemy who insults me, otherwise I could bear it. It is not a foe who rises up against me, otherwise I could hide from him. But it is you, a man who is my peer, my companion, and good friend. We used to have close fellowship. We walked with the crowd into the house of God. There is no one who can hurt me like my friend. My wife is my best friend. There is no one in this world who can cause the kind of damage to me like she can, because she knows me so well. We've walked in fellowship, and she knows all the things that can cause me damage. Make sure you know what kind of friends you have, because they can cause you long-term damage. Proverbs 27, verses 5 through 6. Better an open reprimand than concealed love. The wounds of a friend are trustworthy, but the kisses of an enemy are excessive. It almost seems like the opposite idea, isn't it? There's no one in this world who can help me like my best friend, because they speak to me in love in a way that I know when they're speaking, I can trust their words. When an enemy says, Sam, your beard is terrible, go shave it, I ignore him because he's an enemy. What do I care what he thinks? My wife says, go shave it, looks terrible, I trim it a little bit. But I can trust her judgment. Because she's my friend. What kind of friend do you have? One who will cause you damage in that place, or one who will help you become better in that place? Friends come in all shapes and sizes, and the reality is this: we all need them, and we don't always realize how much until we look around and they aren't around. They're nowhere to be found, and suddenly we recognize, I need that friend. I need a friend. We're going to live in the book of Job for just a little bit. And I'm going to set it up for you. Job is a book about a guy named Job. Not Job, it's Job. And the beginning, in verse 1, we have a great setup for the audience, the reader, us, to know a truth. It says that Job is a man of perfect integrity. That's for us to know. Whatever happens after that verse is said, we can look outside and know whatever's being said about Job or to Job, it isn't true if it's against the whole idea of him being a man of perfect integrity. That doesn't mean he's perfect. He's not Christ. It means that whenever he's screwed up, whenever he's sinned or made mistakes, he recognizes those, he offers the appropriate sacrifices for them, and is forgiven for them. That's the whole idea. Job knows when he's wrong, and he fixes it. So he's a man of perfect integrity. Soon thereafter of meeting Job, we get into a narrative between God and Satan. Chapter 1, verse 6 through 12. One day, the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" "From roaming through the earth," Satan answered him, "and walking around on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity." Not only do we hear it in verse 1, God repeats that idea, a man of perfect integrity, who fears God and turns away from evil. Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him, his household, and everything he owns? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he owns, and he will surely curse you to your face." "Very well," the Lord told Satan. "Everything he owns is in your power. However, you must not lay a hand on Job himself." So Satan left the Lord's presence. This is one of the most difficult passages of Scripture I've had to read. We as Christians may gloss over that part because we don't want to deal with it. It's very confusing, and so I can't talk about Job and ignore this. What isn't happening? What isn't happening is God isn't the one doing the damage. It's Satan. It sounds like it is. God allows it to happen. I don't know why. In my experience, I have experienced God who at times will intervene and protect me. But in this case for Job, it seems like God is protecting Job, and in this moment he removes that protection to allow damage to happen to Job. And we would ask this question. This is a question that we have. Why? What's fair about that? He was a man of integrity. Why would God allow this to happen to him? The ideology, the culture, what they understood about God was when good things happen to us, we're being blessed for our behavior. When bad things happen, we're being cursed for bad behavior. There's a whole left and right swing. When something bad happens, what did I do wrong? I got to fix it. And then good things will happen. That's how they saw the world. How they experienced what God was doing all the time. But we know Job was a man of perfect integrity. So he's done nothing wrong. We know what's happening is that God allowed Satan to interact. The question I have for you is this: what good is faith if you never have to use it? What good is your faith if you never have to use it? The answer is worthless. If God said we're all protected, we're all safe from anything bad happening to us, we would all follow God because life is so good. Why wouldn't we? There's no faith involved. It's simply just life is easy. But life isn't easy. You've lived longer than a couple of years. You know it's not easy. So what's the answer? Well, God is there. God is present. But it's the enemy who is working against us. It's sometimes ourselves working against us. So the answer to your question very simply is, what good is faith? Well, I guess it's a question if we don't ever have to use it. If you want to unpack that some more, the whole idea of why it's not fair, it's not just, we can do that another time if you want. But I just want you to understand that what God is showing us, what we're learning through Job is, when we are under duress, when we are under trials, it's when we are in that moment that we face God and we ask the question why. We have that moment of tension, that struggle, and it points us toward Christ that we grow and our faith is real. As opposed to when life gets hard and struggles come our way and we're like, God, where are you? And rather than ask the question and look for an answer, we turn our backs and say, it's too hard, you obviously aren't real or you aren't a just God, I'm done. And you walk away because you didn't get things the way you wanted them. And Job is faced with that reality in this passage. Because right after Satan walks away, this happens to Job, and it seems so unfair, and it really, I guess, is. 4 servants begin running towards him from across his property. And one comes, this is paraphrase, and says, all your cattle are gone. And one says, all your sheep, they're gone. All your camels, they're gone. So all of his possessions, all of his wealth, in one moment, toast, gone. And then the 4th servant comes. All your children who are dining together, they're all gone. And Job hits the ground, and he tears his robes, and he puts dust on his head because he's mourning all that he's lost. And even still, he refuses to curse God. He questions why. He doesn't understand what's happening, but he refuses to curse God and remains a man of perfect integrity. Satan comes back to God, and God says, have you considered Job? And Satan says, well, you won't let me touch him. You hurt a man's body, you hurt his health, and he will abandon you. He will curse you to your face. And God says, fine. Do what you want to Job, just don't kill him. And Satan leaves. And then boils form all over Job's body. And they're oozing and they're pussing and it's painful and he's scraping him and it's just miserable. He's dealing emotional, stress I can't even imagine. And physical pain I don't want to ever imagine. All at once. And still, he refuses to curse God. He wonders why. Because his ideology is this: I must deserve this. Because bad things are happening. I must be being cursed, but I've done nothing wrong. So in chapter 2, verse 9 through 10, this is a hard one. His wife said to him, do you still retain your integrity? Curse God and die. That's a wife. Ouch. You speak as a foolish woman speaks, he told her. Should we accept only good from God and not adversity? Throughout all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Now, we can give the wife a hard time, but remember this: the wife has lost all that Job has lost too. Her kids are gone. Her wealth is gone. And in their mentality, in their culture, somebody did something wrong to deserve it. You're the head of the household. It had to be you, Job. This is your fault. So I can understand the wife's point of view here. She's wrong, but I can understand what she thinks and how she feels. So what happens next, if we pause it, in the middle of it is a beautiful exchange. These 3 friends come and hear of Job's plight, and they come to visit him, and they meet together, and they come and they sit down, they see him, and they don't recognize him. He's so just distraught, and he boils all over his body, and they sit with him, and they just cry. They tear their robes, and they cover their heads with dust, and they simply share the pain with Job. Man, what kind of friends do you have? Because in that moment, that's incredible. Job chapter 2, verse 11 through 13. Let's read about that. Now when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all this adversity that had happened to him, each of them came to his home. They met together to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they looked from a distance, they could barely recognize him. They wept aloud, and each man tore his robe and threw dust into the air and on his head. And they sat on the ground with him 7 days and 7 nights. But no one spoke a word to him because they saw that his suffering was very intense. If ever you've heard a sermon on Job, you've heard about these three friends and how unfriendly they are. But in this moment, what a beautiful exchange. I want friends like that who will just sit with me and mourn with me when I'm in pain. But unfortunately, it doesn't end there, because Job then speaks up and he says, I've done nothing wrong. I don't deserve this. Well, from their point of view, you must, because you're being cursed. So you need to fix it. So for like 20-some chapters, 30 chapters, these three friends hammer into Job, telling him, you must be wrong. You must have done something. If you would just recognize that and fix it, you'll be blessed again. And Job comes back with, I have done nothing wrong. And we know as the audience, that's true. Because even God said, a man of perfect integrity. In fact, in Job 13:5, the best advice I can ever give you comes from this passage. Not ever, but in exchanging with mourning friends as this. If only you would shut up and let that be your wisdom. And this last year, I've done quite a few hospital visits. And I've seen people who I know are going to die very soon. And it's tempting to want to just speak some truth and just answer their questions and just talk to fill the space. What I've learned is this: your presence is more valuable than anything you can say. I learned to just keep my mouth shut and love people. When they have a question for me, then I can answer. Or if God is really telling me what to say, then I'll be obedient. But just shut up and let that be your wisdom. Unfortunately, I run that a little bit too late in my life. If I can go back in time and shut up more often, I think I'd be better off. But can't do that. What happens in these moments is man trying to speak from man wisdom to a man about something he doesn't understand. For 30-some chapters, God does not speak in the book of Job. This is a part that I heard a preacher talk about that I'm just sharing with you. It's not my wisdom, it's his. I'm sure it came from God. For 30-some chapters, God is silent. This is the layers we're talking about, right? For some of you in your life, you're waiting for God to speak, and you're in chapter like 10. There's some more waiting to do. For some of us, we're in like chapter 36. Okay, we're almost there. Just wait. And here's the reality. Some of us, God's already spoken. You want a different answer. That wasn't good enough, God. I want something different. So you're holding out for the better answer. God says exactly what he wants to say when he wants to say it. When God finally speaks, he simply starts with this: do you know who I am? I laid the foundation of the world by myself. I created all that you see. I am God. I have perfect judgment, perfect wisdom. Who do you think you are? I do what I want to do, and I say what I want to say when I want to say it. Not something we want to hear about God, is it? But as we told the kids today, our timing is not God's timing. God's timing is the only timing I really care about. The 3 layers are this. I couldn't separate them. I tried. I couldn't do it. What kind of friends do you have? And the adverse of that is this. What kind of friend are you? Are you a friend who would sit with your brother or sister and just mourn with them? Or do you use your own wisdom to speak into their lives? Let God speak for you. Sometimes God will speak through you. Sometimes He won't. And let your wisdom be your mouth being shut sometimes. That's great advice to take. I'm not very good at that. The other layer is this. What kind of faith do we have if we never have to use it? And the third is this. God speaks when He wants to. When He wants to. I don't know where you're at in that chapter of Job, in the book of Job. There's moments when I've been on the edge of Him speaking, and I've almost given up. I've almost said, you know what, I don't want to wait anymore, I'm done. But I held out. And what I received was more powerful and profound than anything I could have ever imagined. And there are moments when I didn't wait long enough, and I have no idea what God was going to say. I took my own advice, my own wisdom, and I failed miserably. As the team comes up to lead us in one song, I want you to remember these things. Not a great conclusion, is it? Because I don't think God's done with it yet. He'll finish it inside of you, I believe. Remember that God is powerful, God is mighty, God is the creator. He loves you. He wants to be with you. And there are times when I know that God is just simply being the best friend He can be, and He's sitting with you, and He's mourning with you. And then when He speaks, you can know and trust that He will speak exactly what He means to speak, and it will be perfect. Be patient and know that God is mighty.